And now, it's First and Goal with your host, Big Bear and the Curtain Guy.
This is it, Guardians. One last game to complete the 2023 college football season. It all comes down to the national championship in Houston, Texas. I'm the Curtain Guy, Cole Schutte.
I'm Big Bear T, Tyler Bansky.
And joining us tonight is our good friend and faithful listener of the show, Jeff Booth. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, because this is First and Goal. Gentlemen, as we come to a close on not only the entire 2023 season, but bowl season as well, I wanted to see what your thoughts were on any specific matchups or overarching themes that you noticed. Jeff, with you being our guest, I'll let you start.
Oh, man, what a crazy season. What a crazy bowl season. These 2023 college football bowl seasons have offered an exciting set of matchups and storylines. Some of the ones that come to mind for me was that thrilling Clemson comeback victory over Kentucky in the Gator Bowl. And that thrashing of Florida State, which I guess we all could have assumed was the inevitable with all those recruits that opted out. Additionally, the bowl season, there were a lot of high-scoring contests, a lot of those memorable moments like Western Kentucky's come from behind game in the famous Toast-Dairy Bowl and the game with Western Kentucky, or Western Kentucky's game. I thought it was just amazing. Fantastic. You know, some of the games were blowouts, but I mean, overall, for games that, you know, are made to provide us entertainment, I thought it was interesting. Kept me on my feet.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's kind of funny how with bowl season, people have become absolutely enamored with these inanimate object mascots. The food mascots are running crazy all over social media. You have the Pop-Tart mascot. Dreams do come true. You follow that up with the Cheez-It mascot. I've even heard some fans clamoring that the upcoming NCAA football video game needs to have the mascots on the cover. So the football world's kind of running wild with those. Jeff, you had a couple of great points. You talked about the Florida State thrashing. We knew that it was going to be bad, but 60 points. I mean, that was brutal. You would have hoped that your depth could at least get you something, and it was just there was nothing there for Florida State to put on the field. I mentioned it before. I thought that they were probably better off just boycotting the game and saying it wasn't fair they weren't in the playoff, and take that ridicule, but it probably would have been better than what we saw on the football field. And then that Western Kentucky comeback. I believe they were down to the backup quarterback trying to fight their way, and they were behind. They were able to crawl back and get that victory, which is huge for them. I mean, any Group of 5 team, granted Western Kentucky's been bowl eligible for a few years, but to get that opportunity to play in this additional game gets your school more exposure. 3-star, maybe 4-star recruits, transfers that are looking for places to play. This is where you get to showcase what you do on offense and defense. Let's not forget the bad teams aren't there. They don't get to do that. So, yeah, great bowl season in my opinion.
Guys, all I'm going to say is with the new NCAA game coming out, if we don't get to play with both the mascots of the individual schools and of the bowl games, I think we're all going to be very upset, because I need to absolutely thrash people with a team of 11 toasters, Pop-Tarts. That would just be incredible. I think you guys made a lot of good points. And kind of the overarching theme, I guess I got away from it, is with the transfer portal opening basically right before bowl season, and with the opt-outs that Big Bear mentioned, we get a lot of parity, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to pick the winners of these bowl games. And anybody who was a part of the Walk-On Red Shirts bowl pick'em, I think you saw that. There are a lot of people who are basically floating around 500 because you have to go through and you have to see, you're like, okay, well, in the regular season, I picked this team, but they've got this person, this person, this person sitting out. And then all of a sudden you get into the game, and like Big Bear had mentioned, you have guys that have been sitting or maybe were third string and they get their first opportunity and they go out and light it up. And initially they were thinking about maybe hitting the transfer portal. Well, now their team wants him to stay. They want him to be that guy. So there's a lot of very interesting and cool storylines that I think we got from bowl season. And while many people have written it off, I think you're seeing how it can basically act as a springboard or almost like a spring game into the upcoming season. And so it'll be exciting to see how many of these guys stick around with their former teams and lead them in the 2024 season. Now, before we get into our national championship preview, let's take a look at how the semifinal games played out. We'll start in Pasadena, California, where the number 1 seed Michigan Wolverines outlasted the 4th seed Alabama Crimson Tide 27-20 in overtime at the 109th rendition of the Rose Bowl. What was anticipated to be a low-scoring defensive affair held true as the Wolverines utilized touchdowns from Blake Corum and Tyler Morris to take a 13-10 lead at half. The third quarter saw no scoring and a Chase McClellan touchdown, his second of the day. In the early fourth quarter, saw the Crimson Tide retake a 17-13 advantage. A Will Reichert 52-yard field goal gave Alabama the 20-13 lead before an 8-play, 75-yard drive highlighted by a 17-yard pickup by Blake Corum on 4th and 2 tied the game at 20. In overtime, Blake Corum's second touchdown gave the Wolverines the 27-20 lead before their elite defense stepped up and stuffed a Jalen Milroe quarterback run on 4th and goal to end the game, sending Michigan to the national championship for the first time since 1997. Big Bear, I'll start with you here. You were the only one in the walk-on red shirts group who picked the Wolverines to win. So on top of taking a victory lap here, I wanted to ask if this game played out exactly how you thought it would.
I'm going to say yes. The score that I predicted was very close to this. We talked about how this was going to be kind of a defensive game from the standpoint of we were previewing these two teams on their third down efficiency and how it was crucial to come up big in those crucial moments of the game and to keep drives going, to give yourself the ability to score points, because points were going to be absolutely necessary with these two teams. While third down conversion was not in either team's favor, Michigan was 2 of 11, Alabama was 3 of 13. It was actually fourth down efficiency that played off for Michigan. They were 2 of 2, helped them out with drives, ended up winning this game by 7 points. So you have to imagine that those crucial plays played a factor in them being able to sustain a drive and score points. The other big thing for Michigan, though, was, well, I guess two big things. The first thing was they stuck to their identity. Their offensive line is pretty good. They're not Joe Moore winning like they have been the last 2 years. They're still very close in that term caliber, but they gave JJ McCarthy enough time to look downfield for a couple of pass plays. They gave him enough space where he could leak out of the pocket and extend plays with his legs. He did that a couple times with some runs down the field, but they stuck to their run game. And that was something that, again, Cole, you mentioned this the last 2 years with them in the playoffs, they kind of were getting away from what they do best. And I think that was so crucial for them against Alabama to stick to the recipe that got them there. Blake Corum, being able to trust J.J. McCarthy to throw the ball to guys like Roman Wilson and Tyler Morris. I know Colston Loveland, again, he was almost a non-factor because of how the guys like Deontay Lawson and Chadwell, like the linebackers, they played him really well. So he was neutralized. But Michigan still found ways to get in the end zone, and that was such a huge piece. I thought before the game started, and I'll finish on this, I thought that this wasn't really the Rose Bowl matchup that I wanted to see. Again, as a Pac-12 guy, you're so accustomed to a Big Ten and Pac-12 matchup that seeing Alabama in it just seemed kind of weird to me. But in the end, you look back at this, and I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, this might be a top 10 Rose Bowl matchup of all time, quite honestly. I thought that it was gritty, it was entertaining, the weather was perfect. I mean, the scene there in Pasadena, you can't beat it. And at the end of it, to knock down a team like Alabama that has been in the national championship so many times in the last 10 to 15 years, is exciting. We're having something new. So, I'm happy to have the victory on my belt, but um, we'll see how it plays out on Monday.
And we talked about it last week in terms of the matchup. Obviously, the committee wasn't going to put Alabama against Texas for a second straight time. There was the possibility that we got it in the national championship game, but as you kind of looked at them, these were the best matchups in terms of entertainment because of how the teams aligned with one another. I think if you put Washington in the Rose Bowl against Michigan, you kind of have some give and take there, and you might have an exciting game, just like you might have it in the national championship because of the scoring that's apparent. But in reality, it's not a very enticing matchup because of certain aspects of it. You look at Washington's smaller defensive line. You look at Michigan's secondary against Washington's wide receivers, and you kind of don't really get a great matchup as you did with this one. And then if you kind of flip-flop it, maybe if you put Texas with Michigan and you put Alabama with Washington, again, Washington doesn't really have the physicality to match up with Alabama. Texas and the way that they operate in that spread out offense kind of goes against what Michigan likes to do on defense. So I agree with you. I think we got excellent matchups, and I think that showed. We got down to the wire games, extremely exciting, even for those of us whose team weren't in the playoffs. And now we get another great matchup in the national championship. But I had those three, I guess, points that I was going to talk about going into this game and why I thought Alabama might come out with it. And some of them kind of came true. You mentioned Colston Loveland getting shut down for the most part. Like you said, I thought the linebackers did a nice job of containing him. I thought Caleb Downs was going to be a really big factor in keeping him kind of contained. But they went to what they do best, and they did that by utilizing stuff they haven't used throughout the season. And so I have to compliment Sharon Moore for implementing that for this game. Alabama likes to do this thing that they call kind of like matchups. They will switch players in and out and almost predict what you're going to run and put their personnel in on there. And Michigan kind of got them out of position by using a lot of motion. And you could see it early in the first quarter, especially on that Blake Corum touchdown pass. Tyler, you and I were texting, and we noticed that there were two guys wide open because they utilized that motion to take everybody to the right side while Corum and the wide receiver slipped through to the left, and no one was out in the flat to cover him. And that kind of stuff just got used all game long, and Alabama never really picked up on it. And kudos for Michigan and kind of opening up the playbook and utilizing that to get the win. Before I continue rambling on, Jeff, was there anything that you noticed that kind of stuck out to you?
You guys hit a lot of the points. It really came down to Michigan's really strong defense, and Alabama's offense just, they were at a lot of those struggles. And going back to that overtime with that last call, that last play of the game with Milrose going up the middle because of the bobbled snap. I mean, it's crazy how one little play can really completely change the game. I mean, and, it was, you got to give the center a little bit of grace. I mean, I know he goofed up a few times, but in those kind of games, it's hard. You're the person that everybody's going to go after, and hopefully he didn't get too much hate. I mean, he's transferring. He might come to us, but I guess we'll just have to see. But I was watching to the very end. It was amazing. I'd be lying if I didn't have a little bit of money on it towards the end of the game, but overall, just outstanding. I enjoyed it. I'd watch it again. maybe for a different outcome next time. But what am I thinking?
No, absolutely, and I'm glad you touched base on the bobbled snaps, because I thought they did play a big part of it. And Big Bear and I talked about the turnovers being a big part of it. And while those don't really directly result in turnovers, those mishaps in these talent equated games, they make a huge difference. There was a point where in I believe it was in the third quarter, they were starting to finally move the ball, right? They were utilizing their downhill run game. They were actually getting Jalen Milroe and just direct quarterback snap runs, and they had a couple of penalties and a bad snap that completely took it out of them. I mean, you're talking about, even if that drive ends up in a field goal, the game may be over by the time that Michigan gets the ball back with 4 minutes to go and 75 yards. And then even on the fumble by Milroe when he came out, although it resulted in a Michigan missed field goal, it felt like right there the momentum had switched again, because Michigan had dodged a bullet. It was another scenario where Alabama was driving, and it felt like they were going to just kind of strangle the life out of this game. And Michigan was able to punch the ball free. And like I said, even though it didn't result in points, they kept Alabama from pushing the ball down the field, and at least, at the very least, flipping field position on them. So those kind of things, they play a big factor. And like you said, they're magnified at this level.
The other thing that I would add to that is, defensively, the way that Michigan's defensive line was able to affect Milroe from start to finish. They had 6 sacks on him. For a while there, you thought they were going to get double-digit sacks on him. And that's something that's going to be very crucial for Michigan on Monday against Washington, because Michael Penix is a guy that, while he's been pressured, he still does pretty decent under pressure. And that's a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line in Washington. So a little bit tougher test for Michigan in that regard of the game. But again, it's a team where if you can limit them passing the ball, that makes a huge difference in Michigan's favor.
Absolutely. Michigan, again, did a really nice job of stunting and just creating a lot of havoc up front. And you could see that Alabama's line, as talented as they are across the board, they couldn't pick up on any of the pressures or the blitzes, and they were in Milroe's lap all night long. You said they ended with 6. They had 5 in the first half. And so obviously there were a few adjustments that were made, but I agree. They were just constantly getting pressure, and they're going to need to against Penix. And we'll obviously touch base on that here in a little bit. Gentlemen, our nightcap took us to New Orleans for the All-State Sugar Bowl between the 2nd seed Washington Huskies and the 3rd seed Texas Longhorns. What was anticipated to be a shootout certainly lived up to the hype, at least in the first half, as 6 total touchdowns were scored in the first half as the Huskies and Longhorns went into halftime tied up at 21. From there, however, Washington went on a 13-0 run thanks to 2 Grady Gross field goals and a 19-yard Jalen McMillan touchdown. The Longhorns were able to battle back thanks to an Adonai Mitchell touchdown and Burnt Auburn field goal, but a late Husky field goal and timely pass breakup ultimately punched UW's ticket to play for a national championship on Monday night. Big Bear, I'm going to start with you again here. You're our Pac-12 guy. I know, just as it's tough for Jeff and I to watch Michigan head to the national championship, this is probably stings a little to watch Washington head to it as well for you. But what stood out from you? Is this the Washington team that you have watched all year long?
It absolutely is the Washington team I've seen since the beginning of the season. Their passing attack, as I've mentioned before, absolutely lethal. I've seen it against Oregon twice. I actually messaged in our group with the walk-on redshirt guys. The very first drive when Michael Penix hits Jalen Polk on that 70-yard pass, just gashes the Texas defense. And I said, Texas is done. They're cooked. And granted, Texas kind of fought back to make it a game, but it just goes to show how big that offense plays into the game. And they're not just looking to create drives. They will blow it up in a matter of 1 to 2 plays, and they did it multiple times. Rome Odunze, as much as you want to guard him and game plan around him to take him out of the game, yeah, you kept him from getting a touchdown. He still got 125 yards on 6 receptions. And when he's not able to get it done, then you turn to guys like Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan. Jalen Polk had 122 yards and a touchdown. Jalen McMillan, 5 receptions, 58 yards and a touchdown. And that's without even getting to Jack West over the tight end. Cole, the one thing I talked about last week when we were previewing this game was the effectiveness of Dylan Johnson, Washington's running back, and how he was going to be crucial to give Penix the ability to mix things up. And I was actually surprised at how much they were involving him in the pass game. Again, some of the passes behind the line of scrimmage, so they don't really go in the reception category, but three receptions for 18 yards. He ran the ball 21 times, only 49 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns. And this is a game where the difference was 6 points. Again, very crucial in those tight situations, giving Michael Penix the ability to leak it out to shorter routes and keep himself clean, which that offensive line did a great job. Again, Joe Moore winning offensive line, and they did what they needed to do in New Orleans.
And even when Penix did get pressure on him, he was just making some ridiculous throws. Definitely a guy who belonged in New York for the Heisman ceremony, and quite possibly a guy who may have deserved the trophy once it's all said and done, but that's a discussion for another time. Jeff, was there anything else that stuck out to you watching this one?
Again, you guys hit a lot of those key points. Going back to Michael Penix, just an outstanding player. I remember when he was in the Big Ten Conference with Indiana. I mean, it's just funny how time flies with him, battling against that Texas defense with Byron Murphy and Trevonde Sweat. That offensive line for Washington, they really did an excellent job keeping Michael Penix up, making those critical passes when he needed to. And with Texas' secondary, it came down to it, and it was a good game. Again, the committee got it right. I think Texas and Washington. I think it was another really good set game between two very good and strong teams, and it just gets me more excited for the next game with Michigan and Washington. So those are my points.
Yeah, I have 2 gripes with this game. The first one being the rogue pepperoni that took place in the middle that came back from commercial break. Those of you who were watching the game live saw ESPN's little error where a young lady exposed herself. Again, it's Bourbon Street, it's New Orleans. What do you expect when you're running a camera down there? You should have known what you were getting yourself into. The other part, though, guys, this game kicked off at between 8:45, 9 p.m. on New Year's night. I understand how the bowl system was set up. There was no playoff games on New Year's Eve this year. That was fine and dandy because, as the 3 of us remember from last year, the Buckeyes were kicking the ball at midnight. So you borderline miss the entire ball drop because you're waiting for, ironically, like the biggest field goal of the entire game. I wouldn't replace it with a January 1st game night kick so late. Again, many people, like myself, went to work the next morning. We did not need to be up till 1 a.m. waiting to see who's going to win. You had Texas, which, again, I think they're a central time zone. Yeah, you have Washington's a Pacific time zone, but you almost wish that you had like a 1 o'clock and a 5 o'clock. I know that's not necessarily how it works when you're dealing with the Rose Bowl. I know they have their time slot. Gosh, that was late. And I'm sure half the country probably didn't tune in because they were already in bed sleeping. We got to do better there.
No, I completely agree. I took the day off on January 2nd, knowing that I was going to be up till 1 a.m. watching this game and taking notes for our discussion on this episode. And I agree. They do this constantly. This has been the biggest gripe I think people have had with the college football playoff is that you either get it on New Year's Eve and if your team loses, it ruins the entire evening. That's happened several times. I know Jeff and I had sat there at a New Year's Eve party and watched our Buckeyes get their cheeks clapped by Clemson back in the 16 playoffs. We've watched them lose literally at the stroke of midnight as that field goal went wide left. Or you get it on New Year's Day where many people don't have the second off, and you got to stay up till all hours of the night if you are just watching casually as a fan, or if you are a fan of those teams. And they certainly can do better. And I think to go on with that as we talk into the the preview for the national championship, having that on a Monday night, even starting it at 7:30, I think is ridiculous, because everybody that isn't a Michigan or Washington fan is not going to take a random Tuesday in January off just so they can stay up and watch this game. And I agree with you. I think they can do better, and they should do better by college football fans across the country. Gentlemen, that takes us to the national championship between the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies, both coming in at 14-0. This will be the first playoff game that doesn't feature an SEC team since 2014, where both our Ohio State Buckeyes and Oregon Ducks faced off. And I think it's quite beautiful and ironic that we got a Big Ten and a Pac-12 team to start this 4-team college football playoff, and we get a Big Ten and Pac-12 team to close it out before we head to the 12-team format in 2024. I don't really have any specific questions here. I'm going to open it up to you guys. I want to hear what you guys think, what you think will be the biggest factors, and then we'll get to who we ultimately think hoist the hardware on Monday night.
Well, I'll kind of start it off before I hand it over to Jeff, but a couple points we've kind of talked about throughout this episode as they played key roles the previous week. First one being, as you see there on the screen, trench warfare. Okay, a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line in Washington, facing off against a Michigan defensive line that some would argue had their way with the Alabama Crimson Tide. And that's no small task to do. Again, sacked Jalen Milroe 6 times. Will they be able to make an impact on this game and get to Michael Penix? Michael Penix, he's been pressured 26.1% of his dropbacks this season, and he's completed 45%. Results in a passer rating of 77.7, which not spectacular. So how is Michigan going to do that? Well, I think another piece is Dylan Johnson's injury. He came down at the end of that game, had a low leg injury right in the ankle area. This is a guy who has been banged up all season long. He's been stitched together. He's been wrapped up. He's been fighting through just to get through this season, remarkably so, given what he has done. But if he can't go at or near 100%, I think that is a negative impact on Washington's offense, because now they have to rely on someone else in the backfield to give Michael Penix that time that he needs. Because if Michigan knows that Michael Penix is throwing the ball, either you're going to drop 8 and send 4, or you're going to send the house and try and affect his ability to throw that ball downfield. So I'm going to be curious to see how that impact plays, because that could dictate this entire game. And so we've previewed this in matchups in the past, like a couple of years ago, we talked about that Ohio State-Oregon game in Columbus. Trench warfare, soon to be Big Ten versus Big Ten football. This is going to be exciting because, again, the least respected players in the game down on the front lines. So, Jeff, I'll kick to you. Anything that you want to highlight for the national championship game?
Yeah, it's both teams, they have very contrasting styles. When you look at Michigan, it's all about the defense. Their defense brought them here. You mentioned the 6 sacks on Jalen Milroe's last game. I mean, that was outstanding. I don't remember the last time I've seen him go down that many times. They absolutely just took it to Alabama, which you really can't say much because it's Alabama. It's a Nick Saban coach team. I really do think that whatever happens in this game, it's going to be really close. With Michigan's defense and Washington's high-powered offense. I know you mentioned a few things with the last game with Michael Penix just being able to, execute down the field, get those points on the board early. It was just an absolute. It was amazing. I mean, I really thought after Texas was keeping it close with Washington that Washington was really going to just, was going to settle down. Texas was going to have their way. It was going to be the Texas and Michigan show. But, props to Washington. I think that was a really well-executed game for them. And, going into this game with Washington's high-powered offense with Michael Penix and, like you said, the injury concerns with Dylan Johnson, I mean, it's really gonna change their style. I mean, are they going to be running more? Will you see more passes, more forced throws? If that's the case, then I feel like that plays more into Michigan's hand because they know that they can play more pass. And then on the other side of the ball, JJ McCarthy, he's a game manager. I mean, he when it comes to making those plays, I mean, it hurts for me to say this as a Buckeye fan, but gosh, he has really proved me wrong with all these games. Being able to, execute, making those clutch last few plays in the fourth quarter of that Alabama game. I mean, if he plays as that manager, as that guy, again, with Blake Corum being able to run it up that on that Washington defense and be able to execute on everything, I really think, again, we will have a really close game, and it'll definitely be a championship game to remember.
Yeah, what I find interesting is when we previewed the Sugar Bowl, we knew that it was going to be high scoring. We knew that Washington's defense, in terms of scoring, was not very highly ranked. So how that plays into Michigan being able to score points will be interesting. I think that, in my opinion, I think that gives Michigan the ability to maybe get like 28 points to 31 points in this game. And Jeff, you touched on this, which is great because it leads to my next point. You talked about Michigan and their defense and what got them here, and Washington and their passing attack and how that got them there. I think for both of these teams, it's about sticking to your identity. Like Michigan in the Rose Bowl, they in the past have changed up how they run their offense to try and adapt in the playoffs. When sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes you're built just fine to play in these games. And same with Washington. They have a three-headed monster at wide receiver. And if you then on Monday decide to start running the ball a lot more, I feel like you're not giving your offense that opportunity to do what it does best. So I expect Dylan Johnson to go. They're saying he's going to go. How effective and how reliable he'll be in the game will be important. Maybe is more of a decoy and they have to use the backup more. We'll have to see. But that's a key. And the last point that I want to talk about, when it rains, it pours. And I'm talking about purple rain. Because, oh God, as a Duck fan, I hate saying that. I think I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Washington's ability to stretch the field like they did with Texas, to be able to get big explosive plays, will be a huge difference maker. They're going up against a very testy secondary. Will Johnson, I don't believe I don't think he allowed a single catch for the wide receivers he was covering this weekend. Fans at home, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is going to be an interesting one. Just as big as the defensive line for Michigan versus Washington's offensive line, I think Michigan's secondary versus Washington's wide receivers is something that you have to have circled. And Rome Odunze, if you're Washington, you game plan on him, sure. You can keep him out of the end zone, but I still think that guy's going to get his yardage. And I think that if you do not game plan for Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan to the same extent, you're going to get burned. We're talking in a college football playoff semifinal. The quarterback threw for 400 plus yards. That's a lot. You're talking about the four best teams in the country. That just, no. So, I mean, those are my pieces. Cole, why don't you bring us home here with your take here, where you see this one going on Monday?
I think you guys brought up a lot of good points and a lot of interesting factors that I think, like many of the games that we have discussed, not only during bowl season, not only during the playoffs, but during the entire season, that they will determine how this game plays out. And that sounds lazy. It sounds, traditional, whatever you want to call it. But there are aspects of each team that can be exploited. And I guess I will be paying attention to which team is able to exploit them, at least to the fullest extent. You talk about Washington's passing game, and I agree. I think it's extremely explosive. I think Penix creates a problem that Michigan has not seen the entire season. I know I talked about that with Jalen Milroe's running ability. Not only is Penix able to escape the pocket and pick up yardage like that, he may be the most accurate passer they have faced as a whole since CJ Stroud. And I know Michigan fans will love to sit here and say, well, we're 2-0 against CJ Stroud. Yes, but he also diced you up for over 350 yards both times. Okay, Ohio State just wasn't able to convert in the red zone. Washington is a much better red zone team. So if Penix is able to kind of get their secondary like that, you talk about Will Johnson, there are still questions outside of, on the second side of Will Johnson in that second corner position. Mike Sanistril does a really nice job of covering those up from the safety spot. But if they start to be expanded and having to bring guys out of the box to kind of contain that passing game, you're right. That's where Dylan Johnson can start to find effectiveness with behind that offensive line, which I have been thoroughly impressed with. It wasn't until Big Bear and I watched highlights of the Pac-12 championship game that I really kind of realized that these dudes are so excellent, not only at the point of attack, but like I mentioned, getting to the second level. And if they can do that on Michigan, they'll hit chunk yardage plays on that. And the one thing that I know Michigan doesn't want to do is get into a shootout. So they're going to do what they do best, and that's going to be run the ball. And I think they will find success there just as Washington will find it in the air, because Washington's defense isn't necessarily a bad defense or a bad run stopper. They're just undersized. They rank 41st in the country in rushing yards given up, but a lot of those guys that they have on their defensive line, they're 280 to 300 pounds. I don't even know if they have somebody that's at least 300 pounds, and so that's really a disadvantage to them. And I think Michigan is going to be able to get a nice push off the ball, and if they can continue that, then they'll just go into full boa constrictor mode, especially in the second half. And they'll just grind Washington down for long, drawn-out drives like Jeff and I have seen them do against Ohio State. And that's a much better defensive line, in my opinion. But they eventually got worn out. So if they can do that to Washington, they're going to be in a really good spot. So I think it is very crucial that Penix and company find success. They find it early, and they get up on Michigan and kind of force them to go away from their identity a little bit. Big Bear, I'll toss it back to you to let you kind of give us your final thoughts and who you're ultimately picking in this.
This is tough, truthfully, guys. I think this is a great matchup. I think that although the semifinals was under scrutiny, I think we have the right top two. We have two undisputed 14-0 teams vying for the title, and that's how it should be. God, this is really tough. As a Pac-12 guy, conference is going away. You have that warm fuzzy in your heart, like let's go out with a bang, win a Pac-12 champion. And then if I also think with my brain here, it's like Washington's passing attack. If you saw the game in the Sugar Bowl of how that offense was clicking against a team like Texas, which that team played Alabama and beat them as well. So give them their due for how well they play defense. I think I give an edge to Washington here. It's no disrespect to Michigan. I think that what I'm hanging my hat on here and my final thoughts is you need elite quarterback play to beat Washington. They've played some great quarterbacks this year. They played against Caleb Williams. They've played against another Heisman runner-up, Bo Nix. They played him twice. They beat Oregon twice. They go up against Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers was throwing like just over 50%. They beat Texas. I think that JJ McCarthy is up there in that same category, like that upper echelon, that higher tier of quarterback. But to tell me that he's going to give you an absolute elite style football game on Monday, I just don't see it being enough, quite honestly. I think Blake Corum's going to get his own. I think he's going to get touchdowns. I don't see this being the same kind of shootout that we saw with Texas. I think it's a little lower scoring, but I think Washington and their ability to throw explosive plays is the difference maker. So give me Washington over Michigan by a score of 31-28. I almost said higher than that, but I think that's where I'm just going to hang my hat. 31-28. Washington takes it home.
And we'll get to the gambling aspect of it. That's why we have our friend Jeff on it. But before we get to that, Jeff, your final thoughts, your final score prediction.
Yeah. Honestly, it's gonna be a really good game, regardless. I honestly think I think looking at the spread, I know we're gonna get into the money aspect here in a second, but last time I checked, I believe it was Michigan by 4.5. Honestly, as Big Bear had said, going with Washington, mad respect to the Pac-12. I do think Washington has a chance to cover the spread. However, do they win the game? I really want to. I really want to pick them, but I still think that Michigan, with their defense just being so tough, the bend not break, while offense does help win championships, I think ultimately it comes down to who makes the last play, who's going to be clutch, and just watching JJ McCarthy last year come up short, seeing the look on his face, I just don't know if he's going to allow his team to lose again, especially in the college playoffs, especially with all those rumors with Jim Harbaugh potentially leaving. Whether it happens, I don't know. I really do like Washington's offense, though. They're a very scrappy group. They're able to move. If they can move the ball down or on third downs, they can execute. They do have a chance. However, I still think Michigan it's just destiny for them right now. I am going to say Michigan 27, Washington 20.
Well, with the same score as the Rose Bowl, I respect it. Yeah, listen, I think Washington is going to get their points. I think Michigan fans are lying to themselves if they don't think that this offense isn't capable of putting up points in bunches, even on them. Like Jeff said, the name of the game in today's offense and today's college football is offense. I believe kind of the key number for most of the 4-team college football playoff championship runs is you have to be able to score at least 40 most of the time. This is a Washington offense that's certainly capable of it. And if they were to get anywhere over the 34 marker, I think they most certainly would win. But I just think at the end of the day, I think Michigan's defense combined with their running game, I think ultimately acts as that boa constrictor. I think Washington gets a few body blows in the first half, but they're just not able to quite compete at the end. And I think Michigan is able to just kind of run the ball and run down the clock and keep those possessions away from Michael Penix, keep the ball out of his hands, and ultimately salt away their first national championship since 1997, their first full national championship, if I wanted to be a true Dick, since 1948, I believe. And certainly would be a huge accomplishment for them and for a program that's been in a very dark place for the last 25 years or so. Give me Michigan 31, Washington 27.
Well, you're flipping mine on its head. And to go with it, the the Washington side of things, Washington's never had a full title either. They've claimed 2 titles, I believe 1960 and 1991. Never really had a championship game. They just went undefeated and decided to call it champions. So it was a different game back then. Um, Before we get into the money aspect, and as we wind down the show here, we want to reiterate what we were talking about last week, how starting in 2024 with the upcoming football season after this summer, of course, the summer of wonderful things, bringing up things like NCAA football, video game, but I digress. Um, the First and Goal podcast is going to be exclusively covering the Big Ten Conference. We're excited about it now with the Pac-12 going away and teams like Oregon and Washington going over to the Big Ten. It's going to be a little closer to home for us. But Cole, let me just ask you this. We didn't necessarily have this planned for the show, but is there anything you're really looking forward to next year as we start to cover the Big Ten solely and exclusively?
I think it's, like you said, it's kind of just bringing it all home for us. We've known each other. The three of us have known each other for about 25 years now. I think we all kind of started watching college football, being involved in college football when we were around 8 to 10 years old. And it's something that we've held very dearly. And it was a treat, more or less, to kind of see our favorite teams get matched up against one another, and something that we've only seen 3 times in our lifetime since Tyler had, pledged his allegiance to the Ducks. And so to know that we are going to get it on a more regular basis, I think is going to make a very fun aspect of our, not only our podcast, but of our friendship. And I think that's what I'm really looking forward to.
No, 100%. And for those of us following live on Twitter and YouTube, if you're not following on Twitter and YouTube, definitely check us out. Our social medias at @goal_first if you're looking for Twitter and Instagram. And if you're watching us live on Twitter and YouTube, remember that we're on Spotify as well. You missed the episode this week, go and check us out. Follow us. You get updated on all the latest episodes that we're putting out. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. We have great interviews when it comes to off season. Looking forward to it. But while I have your attention, I want to introduce everybody to next year's biggest piece that we will be putting into the show, and it is the big board. All right, the big board, we're shifting the goal line stand to a different concept. And just to give you feelers here, the big board, we're going to lay out Big Ten matchups. We're going to talk about those games, some of them more exclusively than others. Of course, we can't go over all 18 teams in one episode. It would be exhausting week to week. Trust me. You won't even be watching all those games every week anyway. We'll give you updated with our standings. But again, to kind of go with this episode, our picks for the national championship, you can see them here with Michigan having that 4.5-point spread. You have Cole and Jeff taking Michigan, the Wolverines, and you have me hanging with the Washington Huskies and possibly the last football game. Well, not possibly. This is the last football game for the Pac-12. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to possibly one of our favorite parts of the show that we're bringing up. Jeff is in here at the right time. Jeff, his nickname with us is the Badger. And so why not get to the betting aspect? We're going to bring you Badgers picks for the college football playoff national championship. Jeff, you got a parlay lined out for us. Give the fans at home a little brief description of how this parlay works, but then tell us what your picks are.
Absolutely. So, but first things first, make sure if you are betting, bet responsible. Don't bet any more that you can't afford. It's just something that I like to do personally, and it makes the game a little more interesting personally. So if you see my picks here, you see that I have Michael Penix throwing over 1.5 passing touchdowns. For those that are not familiar with what the half point means, basically means that Michael Penix needs to throw 2 touchdowns, which with the game being a potential high scoring matchup, I see that Michael Penix should be able to throw touchdowns to keep up with Michigan. Or the fact that he's going to have to throw because Michigan's going to shut down the run game. So that personally, I felt like was a no-brainer. With Michigan being as tough as they are, I think that they're really going to start out quick. And so you'll see that I took Michigan's first half spread at 2.5, meaning that they need to win by 3 points. So as long as Michigan's winning by 3 at the end of the first half, that'll be a good thing here. I also got to go with Blake Corum. That boy, he is very scrappy. He scored in every single game, even the playoffs. I'd be a fool not to pick him. And again, that hurts me. But he's a dog. So I'm gonna take him anytime scoring touchdown. And last but not least, I have my boy Rome Adozi. I was talking into this one because I was a little concerned about who Washington was going to pass to, but thanks to Big Bear, we had a little discussion, and he brought up a really important part. He said that Odozie has had over 100 yards in like 9 of his past games. So I mean, if Michael Penix has to throw the ball, who better to throw to than one of his main wide receivers? So I have Michael Penix over 1.5 touchdowns. Michigan first half, 2.5 spread. Anytime touchdown from Blake Corum, and over 89.5 yards for Romeo Adozie. The odds are plus 475. If you place $5 on it, you'll win a total of $28.75. Again, all of these need to hit in order for the parlay to cash out. Please bet responsibly. This was my payout on DraftKings. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be, it's worth a shot. I could be dead wrong. It could be the complete opposite, but you know what? You won't know unless you play. So if you do play it, good luck to you.
Yep, play responsibly. And guys, remember, we're just 3 amateurs who love football, and quite honestly, this looks fun. I might actually place my own bet similar to this. I did talk Jeff into that Rome Odunze pick, and similar to that Sugar Bowl game, 125 yards on 6 catches, didn't even need to score a touchdown. To me, that sounds like a no-brainer. Quite honestly, even if they hold him out of the end zone, I think he still gets those yards, especially with Michael Penix throwing the ball like he is. That's it. That's an exciting pick for everybody at home. Guys, that brings us here to the end of the episode, one of our final episodes of the 2023 season. Update with us on Twitter as we go through. Of course, we'll be posting when the game comes around. Let us know your thoughts on this episode, if the good, bad, or otherwise. Follow, subscribe to us on Spotify, rate us if you like us. If you don't, well, then just go away. But that being said, everybody, we appreciate you being here as always, the Goal Line Guardians, all your dedication to college football and the Walk-On Red Shirts. Remember, walkonredshirts.com. Subscribe with your email, and you can get updated with all of our latest articles. All right, I'm done rambling. Jeff, thanks for being here. Badgers picks.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
It's been a pleasure. And this has been First and Goal.